For nearly 10 years, Halo has become widely known as the best-selling first-person shooter game on the Xbox, and the first game in the series, Halo Combat Evolved, is often credited with putting the Xbox on the map, and has grown into the game that we all know and love today. What some people may not know, however, is that Halo was originally going to be a real-time strategy game for the Macintosh, and was originally unveiled by Steve Jobs at Macworld in 1999, which is sort of ironic considering that the game is now on a Microsoft-only platform. During the development of the game, however, it changed to a third-person shooter, and then it changed again to a first-person shooter. 8 years after the release of the first Halo game, we're given a glimpse of what a Halo real-time strategy game might have looked like, with Halo Wars, a real-time strategy game developed by Ensemble Studios, the same developer that made the Age of Empires series. Sadly, this was the last game that Ensemble ever made, as Microsoft made the decision to close the studio once development of Halo Wars was completed. So, did the studio go out with a bang, or a whimper? Let's take a look. The first thing that you'll notice when you play this game is that it's Halo. When you first pop the disc into your 360, you'll instantly recognise the look of the menu. The same applies when you're playing the game too. You'll notice that Ensemble have stayed true to the architectural aspects of Halo. Human bases look like human bases, Covenant bases look like Covenant bases, Forerunner structures look like Forerunner structures. If the game didn't have Ensemble slapped on the cover, I probably would have thought that the game would have come straight from Bungie themselves. Everything just looks and feels right. The cutscenes in this game are also gorgeous, quite possibly the best I've ever seen. Every cutscene in this game is in CGI and the production values are through the roof. The game is also home to the most badass cutscene in a Halo game ever. On a similar note, it's also nice to get a look at some of the Forerunner technology that's often mentioned in the books. I want to avoid spoiling things, but visual treats such as the Forerunner star system map give you a good idea of how advanced they were, which is something that I think Bungie falls short on in some ways. The music in this game is also superb. It's worth mentioning that Martin O'Donnell didn't compose this music. Instead, Ensemble's own composer, Stephen Rippey, did the music. The music is different. You can tell it wasn't composed by Marty, but at the same time it still feels very much like Halo. Take the theme music of the game for example, Spirit of Fire. It sounds very different to anything else you've heard in the Halo games. It's orchestra music mixed with some sort of techno, but then the distinct monks come into play and instantly you know you're listening to music from a Halo game. Rippey does an excellent job at keeping the Halo feel, but at the same time he puts his own flair into it. With the production values alone, you can tell that this wasn't just some cheap excuse to make a quick buck out of the Halo franchise. You can tell a great deal of time and effort was put into crafting this game, and indeed, there was. The game was announced in 2006, and it's taken up until 2009 for the game to be released. But as we all know from Sonic the Hedgehog, good production values don't mean squat unless the game is actually fun to play, so let's jump into the gameplay. It's worth mentioning that Halo Wars was my first venture into the real-time strategy genre, but having read what other people think of the game in comparison to others, I think I have a fairly decent opinion. Now I know what you're thinking. Halo Wars is a real-time strategy game on a console. It can't possibly work. Well actually, it does. Ensemble does a pretty good job at mapping the controls to the Xbox 360 controller. The controls might be a little bit confusing at first, especially some of the shortcut buttons. Once you get used to it, the controls are actually pretty intuitive. This does come at a cost, however. Halo Wars is pretty watered down as far as real-time strategy games go. For example, you can only build bases in predetermined locations. This isn't to say that the game is bad, however. The game is certainly fun and enjoyable to play on the 360, but I can't help but think that the game would have been better if it was just released on a PC. But that's where things get tricky. The majority of Halo fans have an Xbox 360, and obviously most of them are probably fans of first-person shooters. Putting the game to the PC could drive away some sales because not every Halo fan might not have a suitable gaming PC. The game could also be watered down to allow the game to be accessible to Halo fans. Could you imagine a typical Halo fan trying to get to grips with a typical real-time strategy game? The fact is that Halo Wars is watered down is a necessary evil, so to speak. That said, RTS veterans will probably find this game too simple. With that out of the way, most of the campaign levels are enjoyable to play. Yeah, I said most. Every now and then you'll come across a timed level, or a level with some kind of stupid requirement. These levels are simply not fun. They're not a problem for me now, but on my first playthrough, time levels really irritated me. There's nothing more annoying than playing through a level for 30 minutes and having everything go pear-shaped near the end, and having to start from the beginning. This actually leads me on nicely to my next point. There's no checkpoint system in the game. It'd be nice to have a checkpoint every time you hit some kind of milestone. Instead, if you fail one of the requirements for a level, you have to start all over again. Again, this is frustrating as most levels can take about 30 minutes to complete or so on your first try. Thankfully, the game can be played with a friend on co-op on Xbox Live, so if you're struggling with a level, you can just get a friend to jump in and help you. This is especially helpful when you're trying to collect the skulls that are in the game. For those of you who don't know what skulls are things that modify the characteristics of a game. Some skulls will make the game easier for you, but others will make the game harder. Some skulls even have crazy effects, such as making the scarab shoot rainbow beams. There are certain aspects to the way that Ensemble have portrayed the Halo universe in Halo Wars I actually prefer to the way that Bungie do. Take the Arbiter for example. He's the first Halo antagonist I've seen who is actually intimidating. He's exactly what elites should be, vicious warriors. In Bungie's games, the elites have been reduced to looking like stupid little dinosaurs. I feel that Bungie could take a page out of Ensemble's book here. The multiplayer is done in a similar fashion to the previous Halo games. You gather a party and enter matchmaking to search for other players. Matchmaking times are usually short, mainly because you're only searching for 5 other people at most. You've got 6 characters to play as in multiplayer. For the UNSC you've got Captain Cutter, Sergeant Forge and Professor Anders. For the Covenant you've got the Prophet of Regret, the Brute Chieftain, who doesn't actually make an appearance in the game's campaign, and the Arbiter. Each of these characters has special units and leader powers that they can use. For example, Captain Cutter can call in ODSTs and can also fire a MAC gun from orbit. However, I have some serious gripes with the multiplayer. The multiplayer in Halo Wars is horribly unbalanced. In particular, the Covenant leaders are overpowered. Take the Arbiter for example. He could single-handedly take out an entire army if you upgraded him enough. In fact, his upgrades don't help this. Some of his upgrades actually let him restore health, and one of them makes his leader power use fewer resources to use. It's just ridiculous. And why can he jump onto air units? I think I must have missed the part when they said that elites have bionic legs. The Arbiter isn't the only overpowered leader. Professor Anders' Hawks are also a pain. Once massed, Hawks are nearly unstoppable. What makes this worse is that when you're playing as the Covenant, your only anti-air unit is, in fact, an air unit itself. What does that mean? First of all, you can be taken out by anti-air units when you're using an anti-air unit yourself, which is kind of messed up. Secondly, Anders' special ability is the Cryo Bomb, which freezes an area for a short period of time. This causes air units to crash into the ground, destroying them. It's a rather frustrating cycle. You try to take out your enemy's special unit, but you can't because of their special ability. Fail. The other leaders are overpowered as well. That said, I've already ranted about this before, so I'm not going to keep on about this for too long. There's a link in the show notes if you want to read more. The bottom line is that there's nothing more irritating than having the appropriate units for the situation than having some nubcake use a cheap move to turn the tide of battle, despite the fact that he had the wrong units for the situation. I've only enjoyed the multiplayer in Halo Wars when I'm playing the game on co-op, or if I'm playing with friends against AI opponents. It feels like every game with human opponents is the same. Some guy will quit, some douchebag will mass Hawks. It's extremely frustrating and I find myself going back to Halo 3 rather quickly. Halo Wars has an enjoyable campaign with some high production values. If you're a fan of the Halo series, it's probably worth picking it up for about £20 or something. That said, there's a demo available on Xbox Live, so you should play that to see what you think of the game. The multiplayer suffers from horrible balance issues, so if you're looking for an enjoyable multiplayer experience, you're better off looking elsewhere. Additionally, RTS veterans might find this game a bit too watered down to their liking. This game would have been better on the PC, but I can understand the reasons for putting it on a console.